Hey, Sara. Good morning. Good
Hi.
afternoon. Hello.
Hello. Everybody. Can everyone hear me okay? I don't have a red dot, but I just think maybe I just don't see it. So
We
yeah,
can hear
yeah.
you.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. It's great.
Hi everyone.
There we go. Hello everyone.
Hello.
I see everyone joined, so it's already time. Let's get it started. Hello everyone, and welcome to a series of Women Tech Network events where we invite accomplished tech leaders to inspire and empower you to grow professionally. Today's event made possible thanks to our partner Microsoft and incredible speakers from commercial software engineering team. It is a global engineering organization that works directly with the largest companies and nonprofits in the world to tackle their most significant technical challenges. They've helped customers do everything using AI and deep learning to create sustainable farming practices, protected rhinos in South Africa with facial recognition, to using blockchain to accelerate and secure payments in travel industry. How cool is that? I love the projects you're working on. Today we want to keep it interesting and interactive, so get ready, get your questions ready for the speakers. And let me introduce your today's host. Her name is Jhansi Reddy. She's a senior program manager architect on the CSE team at Microsoft. Before this role, Jhansi was a software developer and project manager on the Microsoft Learning team. A passionate lifetime learner herself, she loved teaching programming to students as an instructor at Seattle Central as well. Hi, Jhansi. Hi, everyone. Great to have you with us. Hi, hello, everyone. And hello, everyone who is in the chat. I see that you are greeting us. Thanks for doing that. Hi, all. And hello, I see many of our ambassadors are also joining. Very cool. Hello, let us know where you're joining from. And Jhansi, I will leave the stage to you. Have a great time. Have a great time, you all, and enjoy. See you.
Thank you so much, Anna. As some of you who are in the participants, I see some familiar faces, mainly because Sara and I were at the Women Tech Mid-Atlantic Connect conference. It was a couple of weeks ago, and we had such a good time, and chatting with you all and interacting with you. We came back, and we not only came back, we brought our colleagues with us. So thank you again for joining. Thanks, Anna, for the great introduction. My name is Jhansi Reddy, and with me today are some of the most amazing members of Microsoft Commercial Software Engineering team, our CSE team. We love acronyms. CSE is a global engineering organization that works directly with the largest companies and also nonprofits in the world, and we tackle their most significant technical challenges. Our wide range of backgrounds and experiences, like our customers, make us unique in how we approach our customer problems. Our wide backgrounds and experiences, we really, with that, we really help our customers every day. So in this panel, we have a gamut of range of experiences and backgrounds, and we have invited several experts from different areas within CSE to answer all of your questions. Questions about what it looks like to be in our org, and what roles we have, what challenges we face and solve in our roles, and how these roles work together to make us all an effective team. We want you to provide with our perspective on the career challenges, things to consider in your career growth, and sneak preview of our world. Some of the topics that you might see us covering would be what are different roles in CSE? And we, typically see software engineering roles, but we do have other roles like program management and data science and human experience. And we have people who interview quite a bit, so they were going to share how to do effective virtual interviews. And as you all know, COVID is affecting all of us. So we'll talk about how it is affecting the way we work and what are some of the challenges and what are some of the tips to overcome those challenges. And also some tips from our panelists on work-life balance or maybe it's work-life integration. We also want to keep this discussion and dialogue very active. So I see that a lot of you are interacting with each other and the chat window. So please keep doing that. And also please keep your questions coming to us. We are here for you. And we have Jessica and Jennifer, who are, thank you for helping monitor the chat window. And they'll be monitoring the window for questions, and they will be asking us the questions, or giving us the questions. And I think Anna did a great introduction for me. Thank you, Anna. And then I'm going to move on to others to introduce themselves. So Janka, you're up next.
Thank you so much, Jhansi. Hi, everyone. My name is Janka Koen, and I am the Senior Human Experience Designer. You might be wondering, what is this human experience? I kind of think about it as user experience, but instead of really just a smaller group of people that we focus on, we really focus on the entire spectrum of the human spectrum. When I'm not saving people or kind of digitally transforming our customers, I also teach at the University of Applied Sciences in Vienna, and I teach a master's degree in prototyping and user experience management. Tempest?
It looks like Tempest drops. I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Federica Nocera. I'm a principal software engineering lead. I lead a team of software devs working on some of the most kind of interesting and challenging problems, sort of integrating Azure into our customers' work. I have a background in ML, and so I'm
Federica, are you there?
Oh no, did it mess up?
You're back.
No worries, you're back. You're back. Go ahead.
We lost you when you were talking about your background in ML.
Right. So I'm particularly passionate about bringing kind of ML models to production and all of the infrastructure and ML ops associated with it. Janani, you're up.
Hi everybody, I'm Janani Vasudevan. I'm an engineering manager in Microsoft CSE, and I'm based in Boulder, Colorado. I've been in Microsoft for about 16 years, different roles, engineer, engineering manager, program manager, and absolutely love the company. So any questions you have about all of that, I'm happy to answer. And love being here and looking forward to all of your questions. So thank you.
Awesome. I'll go next. Hi, I'm Cotishea Anderson. I'm a senior program manager with Microsoft. My background is in computer science. However, I did very little programming and shifted quickly to project and program management, where my passion is. So I'm excited to talk to you more about, kind of how we're playing in that space within CSE. Thank you.
Yeah, I can go next. My name is Sara Spalding, and I am a principal engineering manager, and I lead our financial services industry engineering team. My team is worldwide, and I really love to help our engineers work with our customers' engineers to solve problems. But more than that, my focus is really on helping our engineers grow and develop in their career. My own background is in software engineering. I've worked on products like Internet Explorer and the .NET Framework before joining CSE. So I'm really looking forward to your questions, and I'm excited to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah.
Do we have Tempest yet? Is her audio fixed?
Yeah, if we don't have Tempest, I'm going to read her bio quickly. Just a second. So we'll be having Tempest join us pretty soon, as soon as she has her audio issues resolved. Tempest is a senior data scientist in the health industry, and she is also a biomedical engineer with 15 years of experience in health technology. And she's a full stack innovator with experience in data science, medical technology, medical UX and product design, and wet lab and clinical research, and which they have helped her to improve healthcare with real world applications of AI to health and biomedical sciences. As a data scientist, she works very closely with all the other roles in CSE, such as Federica and all. So thank you, Tempest, and we'll see you soon. Great. Thanks, everybody, for your great introduction. So let me transition to the agenda today, what you can expect from this panel. So today what we plan to do is to share a bit about each other and our stories, our backgrounds and our experiences. So first, each of us will share a short story about ourselves and our careers. And then we'll open it up to you to ask the panelists, your questions, and after we take our turn speaking. And we also want to encourage each and every one of you to ask questions about our career paths, the work that we are doing, or anything else that might be on your mind. We'll also have a brief 10-minute break about halfway through, around 10 o'clock Pacific time and other time zones. After we come back from the break, we'll have the panel open for general Q&A for any of the panelists. And the second half, we also have a couple of breakout rooms. And then these breakout rooms are to answer your specific questions about some of the roles that we shared in the Women Tech Network Board. Janani, thank you, and Sara, thank you. They'll be in separate rooms. They'll be hosting these breakout rooms. We also will have a recruiter, one of the recruiters from Microsoft, Melissa. She'll be there to respond to your questions. Then we'll come back to the main event, and then we'll close out, and we have some last minute questions that we will answer. So while the breakout rooms are going on, some of us panelists will still be on the main stage, continuing on with our stories and answering your questions. So again, if you have any questions to any of our panelists, please post them in the chat window. We'll have people who are monitoring the chat window, collecting those questions and feeding to us. So sounds good? Great.
Hey everyone.
So,
sorry I'm late. I'm back. I just had some audio issues. Thanks for introducing me.
Thank you, Tempest. I'm glad you're able to join us. Thank you. I did the introduction. I did the best I could. Thank you. So to get the ball rolling, I wanted to invite Janka to share her story first.
Thank you, Jhansi. I guess the first story I would like to start with is just in general, quite a few people have already asked me about what is it like, what does it need, what do you need to be a human experience designer, what does my day-to-day look like? But I feel like it would be even more interesting to kind of start with the story of how I even became a human experience designer at Microsoft, because there was something interesting written in my bio, and that's the fact that I kind of created my own role. And so now think back with me 8 years ago. And so 8 years ago is time when I started at Microsoft. And actually, my entire background is not in design or user-centered design. And actually, my entire background is in engineering. I have a degree in software engineering and multimedia. And basically, my entire time or the university, I kind of really thought that's what I really want to do. Something not really uncommon. I was really the only female in the entire class. And what I ended up seeing is that every time when there was like some kind of work in a group, project, something that we had to code, every time all my colleagues kind of said, oh, you go and make it pretty. And I must say, first couple of times I kind of took a little bit of offensive. I'm like, why should I be the one make it pretty? But actually at some point I started to think about it in a different way and kind of really discover it as an opportunity. And what do I mean by that? In my personal life, basically ever since I was born, I kind of had this always a fight of my both hemispheres, right? One, super creative. I love to paint. I love to draw. I'm really kind of visual thinker. And on the other hand side, I did study software engineering because I love to code. I love all the logic stuff. You press A and B happens. And so I kind of felt like, well, if everybody's asking me to do this thing, perhaps I can really use it as an opportunity and think about it, what really happens. How does the software get created? What are all the steps that need to happen? That's kind of how I created or kind of really discovered a path of design and user experience for myself. So everything that I do, everything that I kind of am doing right now is fully and 100% self-taught. And so now comes the story of kind of me coming back to Microsoft and applying for a job. And I got the job. I was super excited. And in general, it was just a consultancy role within Microsoft. And I kind of get my business card the first day. And I was hoping it really would say user experience because that's what I was kind of going for. What it said was System Center Orchestration Manager. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is not what I signed up for. I wanted to do UX. And back then, we didn't really have any UX within consulting services. That's kind of what I'm talking about, not the product groups. And I said to my manager, what is this about? I want to do UX. And he says, we don't do UX. We don't sell UX. And if you want to do UX, you're probably not in the right place. I was miserable for literally, I think 3 months. I was really kind of, bawling my eyes out. It was a terrible time. It's like you finally are in the dream company that you always wanted to be part of. And now, you're in a job that does not fit your personality and your creativity levels. And so one day my manager, he's like, well, it's like, let's go to this customer. We have a meeting with the bank, come observe, see how we do things. And just kind of learn from the other colleagues. And so I come into this meeting, not planning to say anything because I was told so. And all of a sudden, the meeting is with the CIO of a bank, and he says, yeah, it's all perfect. I have a feeling we all have all the technical solution nailed down. The architecture is amazing. I really have the full confidence in the technology, but the experience is literally the most important thing. And there were about 10 people on the table, and he says, so who from you can talk to me about experience that we are offering to our users? And everybody, you just could see like they were slipping down in their seats. And I'm like, okay, I was told not to speak up. What do I do? And I'm like, oh, well, me. And so I literally ended up kind of going to a separate meeting with a couple of the engineers from the customer side. And in the end, the unexpected happened. The CIO, he picked up the phone, he called my manager, and he said, I don't know what it costs, but I want her to be on this project for the remainder of the time that we are building this. And my manager called me back at the end of the day, and he says, like, what is it that you do? We don't sell this. We don't do this. And I said, well, I kind of did what I do best, right? I did. And so he said, well, but we don't really have this role. What is it that we should do? You go, you try this engagement and see how it goes. And truth to be said, a couple months later, when the engagement was over, I really kind of went with the same guerrilla principle of saying, well, there is experience everywhere. It's just you can either define it or not define it, right? And so we better want to define it together. And so really, in a couple of months after being in Microsoft, literally my manager changed my role to become one of the first user experience consultants within the entire Microsoft consulting services in Western Europe and EMEA. So pretty excited about that. And so that kind of one thing led to another, and that kind of was my journey of user experience. And kind of what I really want to leave you with is, sometimes you really are in the front seat of the things that are happening to your career. There are just sometimes things will definitely not go according to how you want it, maybe in your life. But if you are not the one who speaks up, if you are not the believer in the skill set that you have and the value that you can offer, then nobody else will fight for you. And so if you find that courage in you to speak up and really fight what you want in this industry, in design, in engineering, in machine learning, or whatever else it is, if you won't speak up, you won't get it. And so I reached out. I ended up being the first person, and kind of that led to one thing to another, and me now joining the amazing CSE team. I have another story, but I kind of feel like I kind of went into a complete different journey. So I kind of wonder maybe we can move into Q&A if there is anything around it, or talk about engagement, anything like that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Janka, for sharing your story. We do have a lot of questions, and The one question that's been posted here that I want to ask from the audience is that there is an audience member, they're finishing up their PhD in linguistics and cognitive services, and they wanted to ask you whether linguistics can be part of a human experience design / research team, and what skill sets are needed for such a role.
Mm-hmm. So this is super interesting question. So again, it's kind of interesting to look at, you know, the CSE, the organization that we are part of, and then in general, the Microsoft and Global. Honestly, linguistics is such an important skill set to have, you know, even everything that you do, the same way as people connect with images, the same way that people connect with amazing technology that just works, the same way they just connect with the content, right? With everything that happens around the copy and how we really convey things. So absolutely. I mean, we are kind of now in a role of crafting all of these messages. You know, how do you position it? In the same way as I'm saying, you're crafting the story with the images, the same way you're crafting the story with your words, and one thing cannot go without the other. So definitely, I mean, there is a lot of opportunity. My team, you know, we are looking into scaling up, and we're definitely looking into scaling a lot more into our research capability. So that definitely could be one way of going. So I would definitely encourage the person that asked the question to see if there's a potential, and if it's not within the CSE. Honestly, at Microsoft, we have such an amazing, talented pool of many thousand designers, and a lot of them are also working within linguistics as well, of how we position ourselves. And so absolutely, I would be happy to connect with whoever posted a question, and we can see if there is an opportunity.
Thank you, Janka. And I remember a conversation that we had in one of the all hands. I was asking you, you know, I'm not a creative person. I don't know how to draw even a stick figure. And then you reassured me and you said that, you know what, anybody can draw, right? So I think it is the way we tell our stories, and whether it would be design thinking or, you know, storyboarding. What are some of the tips for participants or for others where you think that, you know, you cannot communicate with you know, figures or story? How does one, you know, gain that skill?
You all have it. You all have it. That's kind of the simplest question. I teach sketching at the university. So if I would be saying that you cannot learn this skill set, no matter how untalented you think you are, because I don't believe anybody does not have talent in kind of conveying a visual message, I probably would not be a good teacher. For me, I always kind of like to talk about the analogy, you know, when you're a small kid, when you were young, you know, you always were drawing, doodling, doing things, you know, on paper, and you kind of just went around and just was like, yeah, look, mom, you know, look, dad, or look, everybody, you know, I made this, I painted this. And it was just so simple for us to communicate in this visual way. And then at some point, we kind of just started comparing ourselves, you know, looking left and right. Oh, you know, she can maybe draw a better line than I can. Her circle is better than mine, or things like that. And all of a sudden our confidence again kind of just went back, and we lost this kind of touch, you know. Now even with the digital, everybody's just typing, you know, things like even writing, like even calligraphy, those are even some other ways of how people can literally start on their journey of discovering their own creativity. There are some amazing books around there, out there, and I'm happy then to just post them here in a chat, that are really talking about unlocking and really rediscovering your own creativity. But literally the simplest thing you can do, you know, the next time you have a meeting, you have a call, just have a bunch of pencils, have like notebook next to you, and just start doodling, you know, have some maybe painting by colors, or, you know, just kind of this books where you color things, and start rediscovering these things. And I promise it will happen. And again, I'm more than happy. I do a lot of talks in this area. So there are a lot of things that I can talk about this probably for the rest of this call, but I want to give a chance to somebody else to speak up. But fantastic questions. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask other panelists, you know, what are some of the visual aids, you know, that you use when you are communicating, like whether it be whiteboarding or, you know, communicating with diagrams and, you know, boxes. I feel like it's a really effective communication tool. So if anybody else wants to share their experiences, please do so.
I can chime in here. One of the things that I am really proud of and the things that I like about our team is that we do a ton of demos. Like we, almost every meeting that we have our engineers actually show the work that they're doing. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be polished. We sort of liken it to say, like, if you were walking around in an office and leaning over somebody's shoulder so that they could show you what they were working on. So there are lots of things from the command line. There's lots of kind of hand waving and not kind of a fancy executive demo, but we really are kind of a show me organization. And I feel like the demos that we do are really one of the most concrete and illustrative ways that we share our work.
Yeah, thank you, Sara, for sharing that. So Janka, on a lighter note, I heard and I know that you have a new addition to your family, and you want to talk a little bit about Lily and how Lily is helping you in this COVID times. I would love to hear that.
Absolutely. The entire time I'm kind of like hoping, that she remains quiet. So I do have an assistant. She's literally right here sleeping. So Lily is a 1-year-old rescue. My husband and I, we were kind of thinking of having a dog for such a long time. And now again, being home, basically not traveling and finishing up our home that we are just building, we felt like, okay, let's buy a puppy. So she is, I kind of like to call her, she's a little bit of a combination of like Bambi, maybe like a seal, sometimes crocodile, sometimes American staff, but probably I would say the seal is the most present. And yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of have a feeling I'm rediscovering the whole productivity once again, because I kind of have a feeling that now, during the COVID time, it's just so many stress factors that you're dealing on top of everything else, right? It's not just worrying about your closest ones, worrying about dogs barking, somebody ringing, postman coming around, but all of a sudden there's just so much more mental load. And I really rediscovered that by having her, I just really am thinking of so many ways of how my day have improved, by going on walks, all of a sudden, like, she will definitely wake up during this call. This is a 2-hour call. Her patience will not hold on this long. And she will just come here, and then for me, just taking the mental break, and having somebody who is just so excited, to see you, to, be with you and, going out and just clearing your head. I mean, for me, I have a feeling it was almost like a lifesaver. It's not only about us saving her life, by taking her out of a dog shelter, but at the same time, I kind of have a feeling it almost is giving us a new purpose, my husband and I, to kind of really make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And it really has boosted our productivity in a way that I kind of feel like I'm working less because I spend more time with her, but I actually am feeling a lot more productive. So, I mean, I'm not saying everybody should get a dog, but definitely get one from an animal shelter if you're planning on doing so. So Lily is a proof of that.
Great. Thank you so much, Janka, for sharing your story and, sharing Lily with us. Next up, we have Tempest. Tempest, can you please take on the stage and share your story?
Yes. So, can you all see me and hear me? Good. Yes, I'm.
We can hear you.
Great. So I'm a data scientist in the healthcare team, and so people often ask me how I got into this role, which is at the intersection of data science and healthcare, because this field is relatively new, but I've been in it for so long. So actually, when I started studying engineering, AI and machine learning were very out of fashion. It was actually considered AI winter. So even though I was learning about neural networks and computer vision, it wasn't actually called machine learning. And there's been a lot of rebranding of a lot of engineering and scientific disciplines into what we now call machine learning. So I'm from South Africa, and I enrolled in the first biomedical engineering degree in the country, and probably one of the earlier ones in the world. And I went this route because I loved science fiction growing up, and I was interested in sci-fi and cartoon characters with, bionic limbs and biomedical enhancements. And it was actually an advert for a prosthetic limb in a magazine that I saw when I had just finished school that hooked me. And initially I was interested in designing robotics for humans. So I did the biomedical engineering degree, which I loved. And after my biomedical engineering degree, I actually applied to med school and got accepted to med school. And 2 weeks before starting medical school, I pulled out and realized that doctors are at the front line of healthcare. And we've obviously seen that a lot these days. But I realized that there are other ways to help people. So I wanted to be an engineer and help people improve healthcare that way. So I realized that I'm an engineer at heart and went to study electrical engineering and did that degree, which is quite unusual, the 2 undergraduate degrees. But in those days, when I'd finished the first degree and even the second degree, there weren't that many jobs for biomedical engineers. And it's only really in the last 5 years or so that I have seen jobs for machine learning engineers in health or health data scientists. And I think that change has been for a number of reasons. Firstly, the big tech companies getting interested in healthcare is a relatively new thing. Also, the rise of wearables, like Apple Watch and Fitbit. This is making people aware of sort of measuring medical signals. And then thirdly, probably the rise of genomics and sort of sequencing the human genome and the data that was coming out of that. So I think these are all factors that have brought kind of health data science into people's minds. So there were very few jobs, and you really had to fight to get a biomedical engineering job. And a lot of people weren't, or maybe still aren't really sure, what does biomedical engineering mean? What does that qualification mean? To be honest, it sounds a bit made up maybe, or it sounds a bit like science fiction itself. But I've been lucky enough to find jobs that did use my degrees, or I could craft a role around my expertise. So initially I was interested in the medical devices themselves, the robotics and the sensors that you can wear and implant. But I became increasingly interested in the data that the devices were producing. And so I switched my focus more towards the data and the data science. So after the biomedical engineering degree and the electrical engineering degree, I did a PhD in bioengineering at Imperial College. And then I worked in a couple of digital health startups in London. So there I worked on a product to make genomics data more accessible to researchers. I also developed a portable blood testing device for low resource settings that actually pivoted that to become a low-cost soil test for farmers. It's a long and interesting story. I also helped develop an Apple Watch to monitor depression, which has been used in a clinical trial, and a system for monitoring Alzheimer's disease through phone apps. And at Microsoft, I've worked on Project Physio, which is about trying to improve physiotherapy care for children with cystic fibrosis. So these are all the ways that I've tried to kind of apply engineering to improve healthcare, and specifically through data science. And more recently, I've become increasingly interested in fairness and bias in AI for healthcare, and actually recently worked on a healthcare project that involved responsible AI, where we were checking that a model is treating different patients fairly. So I think that's a really exciting area at the moment. So yeah, happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Tempest. There are quite a few questions for you. So we have a couple that we picked. So the audience member wanted to know the interest in IoT and connected devices, and how is CSE involved in these projects? So if you want to answer that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so I love IoT because that's kind of my background, I guess. So we definitely do IoT projects in CSE. I personally work on more of the data science projects once the data is collected, but that might be a better question for maybe Sara. you want to speak to IoT projects in CSE? Because I haven't personally been on any.
You're on mute.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the projects that Federica and I worked on together was actually one of my favorites. It was with a large heavy equipment manufacturer, and they wanted to kind of overall they wanted to understand how they could use machine learning to improve their production process or their manufacturing process across the board. So we took a very small, quote unquote, small example, and they said, you know, when we build forklifts, we have to build the whole forklift, and then we stress test it at the end to make sure that all the welds are good. And stress testing is a test where you don't actually test that it's good, you just test that it's not bad, which is not perfect. And so, and also you could make a mistake, or you could have a weak weld in the very first weld on the production line, and you don't get to test it until you have built the whole thing. And so that's super expensive. And so what we did was we worked with them to better understand their manufacturing process and their welding process, and then built a model that was based on the sound of the weld. We learned that good welds sound different from bad welds. And so merely by listening to the weld, a master welder can tell if a weld is good or bad. And so our machine learning team took a bunch of audio data and used that audio data to build a model so that they could predict if the weld was good or bad. And so obviously we used IoT as a way of building we built a microphone to pick up that data. So that's a kind of a recent example of an IoT project. We also did another one, I won't go into as much detail, where we worked with Walmart actually to help them reduce the amount of food waste and energy consumption in their refrigeration units. And so we used IoT devices to both measure and control the temperature and the humidity in those devices. So back to you, Tempest.
Yeah, thank you, Sara and Tempest. So the next question we have for Tempest is, how do you execute team collaboration? And you work with engineering teams quite a bit. So how do you collaborate with them effectively?
Well, so we work very closely with the software engineering teams. So like recently, Federica and I worked very closely together. We're not a data science team that creates notebooks and then hands the notebooks over to the software engineers to do something with them and productionize them. We actually work very closely. So the data science team has to adhere to the same software engineering standards as the software engineering team. So we write unit tests for our code, we use source control for our code, and so we're all speaking the same language. We collaborate very closely, and I think it really helps that we are working together and using the same language.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Federica actually is up next. So that's, yeah, go ahead, Janani.
No, I thought it would be great to kind of have Federica talk about the same topic, because I know she's been working closely with Emil. Yeah.
It's actually very much something I'm going to talk about as I share my story. So I may hold off sharing too much right now.
No, you're up next, Federica.
Great. So hi, everyone. I'm Federica. I have had a little bit of a, I guess, circuitous path to becoming a software developer and a software development manager. So I actually studied mechanical engineering as an undergrad. Then I worked in finance for a while, building sort of these large Excel spreadsheets to determine the value of these different stocks in these different companies. And writing kind of research reports on those, and all that time I was, I knew there must be a better way to kind of analyze data than using Excel. Although I do love Excel, and so that kind of led me to grad school. to kind of change trajectory and pick up some data science skills and really improve my programming. And I really wanted to become a data scientist to explore kind of the areas that I found interesting. So, for example, the dynamics between people, kind of the organizational dynamics that I had seen in the financial institutions. And yeah, I generally just have a passion for sociology and kind of understanding people in I guess, a quantitative way as well as a qualitative way. And so sort of after grad school, I worked as a data scientist creating machine learning models for marketing for the Xbox team. So we would, create lots of recommendations and that sort of thing for Xbox. And I saw like a real need to kind of robustly productionalize these models and to harden kind of data science and machine learning. Kind of like Tempest said, it's all well and good to experiment in a notebook. That's a fantastic kind of playground, but at some point you need to really harden the solution to be able to bring it to production and for it to function in I guess, a repeatable and predictable manner. And so that work really led me to CSE and the software engineering team that I'm now a part of. I guess I feel a little bit at times as a sheep in wolf's clothing, just because I guess I'm I used to be a data scientist, now I'm a software engineer. And to me, it really helps kind of understand the challenges and some of the cultural differences that there can be within organizations, especially kind of in customer organizations between engineering teams and data science teams. And really, you just need to come together. And, both perspectives and both approaches are really needed and really valuable. But you have to kind of have an insight into both to kind of be able to collaborate effectively. And you need to be open to that as well. So, I mean, in our recent project with Tempest, we worked with a great healthcare organization, but we realized that the data scientists had totally different access privileges, couldn't even get into some of the data that we had. Their laptops were sort of locked down in a different way. So sort of driving that organizational change is actually super important. So back to sociology, I guess. It's partly kind of how Tempest and I met. Tempest was sort of sitting downstairs as part of a data science team, and then she sort of came upstairs with all the software devs, and that's sort of how we started to get to know one another, and that's why we're so I guess well practiced at working well together now. So I would just say, I don't think this is just an aspect of data science or machine learning and software engineering. We all have to be really kind of understanding and open to outside perspectives. And I guess, I am lucky that I have that background in ML, and I can put on sort of my ML hat and, I guess relate to the struggles and the challenges from both perspectives. But Tempest too, she's always very open to, diving into DevOps and making sure that she also kind of has the infrastructure background. So I guess I just want to end that we just have to be kind of willing to cross collaborate and understand each other's backgrounds and perspectives.
Yeah. Thank you, Federica, for sharing. Actually, we have a really relevant question to what you just talked about. What do you think are some of the prerequisite skills that are needed for someone who intends to become a data scientist? So yeah, you or Tempest or anybody can answer this.
Sure, I can start, and then maybe Tempest, if you've got something to add, please add. I really think you have to be first and foremost very analytical and inquisitive of data, because it's really about kind of rationalizing the data and asking relevant business problems of data, and that's kind of where it all starts. And you have to be very willing to learn. Google whatever you need to, or Bing whatever you need to kind of understand kind of new techniques, new kind of programming tools, and really kind of the internet.
Yeah, that's a good answer. What did I add to that? I mean, data science is such a fast-growing and relatively new field that people come in it from all different backgrounds, and there's no way you can know everything. So everyone is always learning and keeping up to date. So yeah, that's why you find such diverse people in data science. So as long as you're happy to keep learning and keep try to attend conference talks and read, that's really important. And then in CSE in particular, data scientists need to be have a bit of awareness about business goals and tie those machine learning metrics to business metrics that can actually be useful for a business. And ultimately, we're solving real problems with data science. We're not just doing research and coming up with an accuracy score, and that's the end. We're solving real problems. So we really have to tie those machine learning metrics back to something in the real world, which is actually quite a creative process, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I like the fact that you said we are solving real problems with data science. I do have a question, general question, that's for everyone. It is, what are some of the challenges that you faced as newbies at Microsoft? Any new job that you start, you always have this jitters and maybe I don't know anything, everybody else knows everything, right? So if, maybe Cotishea, if you want to share, your experience with that.
Yeah, I was coming off mute for that. Definitely challenges. I will say when I joined Microsoft in 2018, I was coming in with experience from the telecommunications industry. So I felt like, I had established myself in my career prior to joining Microsoft. However, coming in new and with the heaviness of Microsoft as a brand and all of these really smart people around me, I felt really intimidated. And I know someone just posted to the chat about imposter syndrome, and I was like, hands up, I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone's gonna find me out, sooner or later. And so the thing that I learned is the best way for me to come out of that was to really acknowledge the things that I didn't know. Like, what can I really take steps on, solid steps? If it's about learning the technology, then how can I take a solid technology? Who can I find as a mentor? And then from there build more and not feel intimidated by asking those really hard and sometimes what appears to be, a dumb question in a meeting or someone that you trust. Like, just put yourself out there and ask. What I've learned too within this community is people really want to help you. No one wants to see you fail, and it's getting over yourself a lot of times that holds us back. So that's what I've done.
Janani, do you want to add to that?
My not so new perspective, because I joined Microsoft 16 years back, but I think this applies to every new job that you move on to, right? I mean, like the minute I became a manager from being an individual contributor, or the minute I end up leading managers. And so I think one of the things that Cotishea mentioned, definitely, ask for help. I mean, it's actually good to ask for help. The minute you open that up, you actually get so many perspectives. Like, for instance, if I'm like stumped on something, I have a one-on-one with Sara, and she gives me these perspectives which I have not thought about. And so it's just like really interesting to kind of open up and ask for that help. I think that's one thing I've learned to be better at, and I used to kind of shy away from it and think that, oh, I don't want to ask about it. I've become better at it. And the other thing is, just never stop learning. I mean, one of the things that someone asked me about is like, how do you kind of get over this imposter syndrome? So yeah, agree what you don't know, understand what you don't know, and then spend time on working on it, and be truthful to yourself. Like I tell my team, I don't have time to code enough. Like, I have to make sure I make like 30 minutes every day to kind of at least keep in touch with things. And so it's okay to kind of ask, get help, and have a truthful plan that you can keep up to. But yeah, lots of what Cotishea said, I agree with.
Thank you for sharing that, Janani. To go into the topic which is very relevant in these times, it's about working virtually and virtual teams. right? So we're all affected by that, and this panel in itself speaks for that, right? We are not in person panel; it is a virtual panel. So, what is your view on how globally and working virtually going in this new era, and some of the tips that you have for people to make it really, effective? Anybody wants to take that?
I guess I can give it a go, and then if anyone has other insights, do let me know. So I guess one thing that we try and do is just make sure that we're always kind of pairing with people and sort of collaborating, because it can feel very sort of isolating, and it's very easy to feel kind of disconnected from the wider team, just given our screens, given sort of Teams, given Zoom, or whatever kind of tools you're using. We, for example, have like a scheduled social stand-up every morning. It's just 15 minutes where the whole team, it's a couple of teams that come together just to share, I don't know, photos, something fun, even present, an internal project, something that they've been working on the side, and just have kind of a water cooler chat. And not everyone joins every day, but it just provides a kind of social element to your day outside of your immediate, project group.
I agree with what Federica said. I think it's important to create that atmosphere that you don't get by being at the water cooler or hanging out in the office, to be very intentional about that. And then if you find yourself isolating too much, just reach back out there, like take a step out. It's easier said than done, but even if it means setting a reminder in your calendar, like when was the last time I actually had time for myself, and I think that's the most important thing, because we as women take care of everyone else. Having that intentional time for yourself, having that intentional time for community. I think this COVID situation has lasted a lot longer than any of us anticipated, and we don't have a definite end to when things are going to be in the new normal. So the best that we can do is to adapt, to really start to develop healthy habits that are going to help us survive the next, month, 6 months, however long it takes, but things that we can do for life.
Mm-hmm. I can add on to that. I think that one thing that I personally try to do is to schedule a one-on-one with somebody outside. Like I have my normal one-on-ones with my boss and my directs and that sort of stuff, but just with a peer or somebody else in the organization that like I would just go have coffee with and really focus just on the social or the personal connection with that person. So it feels like, even though it's still a video teleconference meeting, it still feels kind of a little less worky and a little more personal. Something else that I've noticed is something one of my colleagues and I have started to call the fog, which is where you're sort of overwhelmed and stressed, and you just find yourself sort of staring at your computer and forgetting what you were working on, or you're like, what was I doing? Why is this window open? How did I get here? When that happens, get up and walk away. Like, just, you're not being productive. Staying glued to your computer is not earning you any points. Like, just get up, go eat some ice cream, or go outside, or do a little yoga or whatever. But like, that's your brain telling you that it's not functioning anymore at any sort of productive level, and you just need to go do something else. And so that's something that I've been trying really hard to catch myself, because somehow I feel like, oh, it's work time, I must be at my desk. And really just stepping away and going outside or playing with my dog or whatever can be really helpful. So those are a couple of things that I do to try to manage.
Thank you, Sara, for sharing that. It kind of reminds me of one thing that I started doing, especially in those meetings, like all hands, where active participation is not required. Just taking those meetings outside while you walk, right? Just walking back and forth, and turn off your video and you take those meetings. So It doesn't work for all meetings, but I think there are some of those, all hands or meetings where your active participation is not required, and that works for me really well. We have a lot of audience questions coming in, ladies. So one of them is really interesting, and we all go through this. Sometimes crazy deadlines, there is not much time for one to learn and deliver within the time frame. What would your advice be for folks who are facing this? Janani, you want to take that?
Yeah, so I think I answered that too. So that's a very, very fair question. I mean, all of us struggle with that. And, the first thing would be, that's okay. Like if you have deadlines, those do take priority. It's okay to kind of, be a little bit flexible and, give yourself some space. And I also think it's like one of the things I've tried that seems to be working so far is trying to kind of hear videos as I, kind of walk, or as I'm, kind of like doing my workouts. It just kind of helps to kind of get in the the zone of like understanding the technology. It's probably not going to be very useful for things that you have to work hands on, but it helps for some of those things. The other thing would be to kind of pair up with folks. I mean, I definitely like that approach. I mean, there are folks on my team who are great with React and TypeScript, and I put that in there. Like that's been one of my goals. Like, can I develop a website for myself? Like, and I keep a goal that's like pretty achievable, like 6 months from now. So that gives me a little bit more time and flexibility to kind of fit in that. So definitely working with others, like that gives you a little bit more flexibility, trying to kind of use the time that you're walking or working out to get kind of listen to podcasts or some of these videos that might be helpful, and then kind of giving yourself like the space and saying it's okay to kind of take more time. I think those are my tips for that.
Thank you for sharing that, Janani. The next question that we have is something that I think all teams are affected by, that is onboarding new hires, right? And being a new hire and onboarding in itself is hard. On top of that, with the virtual onboarding, not being able to meet the team members, what would be the advice you would give a new hire who is working remotely, starting a new job, and they don't know much about the team or company culture? How do they integrate quickly? Sara, you want to take that? You're on mute, Sara. Sorry. Sara, you're on mute.
I was just going to say, I think that I was just thinking that Federica would be a great person to handle this question, because she has recently managed somebody who is new to the company and just coming on board. So I will, if you don't mind, Federica, I'd love for you to answer it.
Sure, no worries. So just as a bit of context, we had an intern join the team over the summer who, we weren't involved actually in the hiring process, so I'd not met them before. And I've also had 2 members of my team join while remote from a reorg. So basically 3 new members of the team kind of joined recently. I would say, I just tried to connect with them as much as possible as a manager in the first kind of few weeks of them joining. So I would definitely kind of encourage you to make sure that your manager makes time. I also set them up with a mentor from the team, someone that they could pair with and kind of reach out with any sort of smaller, more technical questions or when I'm sort of not available. We also kind of set some, I guess, almost like semi-goals around kind of reaching out to people and setting up coffee chats and trying to get as much of a mix of different people from different parts of the org as possible. So maybe starting the team and then kind of going more broad, and also sort of joining them up with any kind of new hires who also recently joined, just kind of to give them a bit more of a sense of community and to kind of share any learnings around culture and interactions.
Yep.
I think in our team, we just had someone join remotely, and just having someone to buddy up with. So if your manager can't always answer your questions, someone else that could just answer questions about even things like tax and gym benefits, and just like making sure that you're using all your benefits properly, and just basic things like that. And like, also if there are company all hands, can be a really nice thing to watch. Like I know someone in a different Microsoft team who joined, and he didn't really know that he should be watching the kind of big all hands meetings. So getting a sense of your own immediate team and then the kind of teams above you is also a nice sense of giving you a nice sense of the organization, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Tempest. Yes, I think having an onboarding buddy that you can kind of tag along for a month or so, and they will be all the source of information for you. Also helped in our team when we were onboarding a new person. There are a lot of questions, which is great to see. So please keep them coming. There are a lot of them about remote working, and within CSE we work with the customers, and those interactions used to be very different. So just generally asking about how the working on the projects with customers has changed, and how we are collaborating differently with this remote work and COVID situation.
I can start that one. One of our projects was starting just as COVID hit. So we completed our architectural design session, and then that very next week, or during the session, actually travel was limited, and there was no meetings face-to-face after that. Everything kind of shifted to virtual. So initially we said that was going to be a huge risk, because now we're not meeting with our teams face-to-face like we would normally do. And, we wanted to make sure that, everyone was going to be accountable for the work that they. And what we found was that the team that we were working with on the customer side wanted to be engaged with us as much as we did. They suggested that during our stand-ups that we start having social time where we shared things from recipes to favorite pictures from the weekend. And we just really start to build that community, which helped the project actually. So it didn't take away from it. It actually helped us to deliver more effectively. And then having consistent communication and everyone starting the meeting with the cameras on, so that, at least you kind of get that personal connection. And then after that, dropping because of bandwidth issues and everything, but, making sure that we develop that face-to-face time. We could see one another. We were intentional about sharing our experiences and building the community, because I think a lot of times when we're in person, we don't do that as much, or maybe we do, but it's just in a different way. So it's intentionality that really helps to drive that.
I would like to build upon that, if I may.
Please go ahead, Janka.
I think that was a fantastic point, Cotishea. I think maybe additional, for me, it's all about, again, not looking at it as something, oh God, now we need to rethink everything. For me, it's, again, looking at it as an opportunity. In the old world, let's put it that way, we went to a customer, we scheduled a workshop. The workshop could have been anywhere from like 5 days or a couple of days, all in one piece, right? And so what tend to happen is that when you are literally every day, like you wake up, let's say from 9 to 5, you're in customer meetings, there's just so many things, so many follow-ups that you usually take with, and you say, okay, well, it just always piles up because you just don't have the time to kind of look it up. What happens now is that these sessions, of course, they cannot be 8 hours. Nobody has, the perseverance to stand in front of a camera for such a long time. So we definitely have cut them down. You do a lot of breaks, and they're now, instead of like, 3-hour sessions split into like multiple blocks with multiple breaks. But what you can do, and again, that's turning it into an opportunity, is all of a sudden, all the questions that kind of have come up, you literally have the remainder of the day to kind of go and look that up. So I do have a feeling, and from what I have been seeing, is that it actually has helped us to, I would say, almost iterate and ideate a lot faster, just because the return cycles of somebody having a question, many times it's just not about, hey, this is a symptom and this is how you kind of solve the problem. But as many times, let's dig into the problem. Let's kind of find out what opportunities, what potentials, what alternatives there are. And you're just able to really iterate a lot more faster within that cycle. So for me, it's, again, all about looking at it from a different perspective and turning it into opportunity. Another example is that my colleague and I, she is based in Australia and I'm based in Austria. So kind of looking at it, there are many time zones for us. And yet again, we turn it into opportunity. My amazing colleague Buhuanas, we kind of learned to tag team, so we again turn it into an opportunity. By the time that she finishes her day, we have a 1 hour scheduled time. We kind of, sync up, hey, this is what I talked about, or this is what I kind of captured. We keep a really, really good kind of flow of things that we have done. And then basically I'm able to take over her work. And then again, I kind of write it up together and you're literally able to, I have a feeling it was delivered faster, but that's just kind of my perception of things. I would wonder to see if everybody is seeing the same.
Thank you, Janka, for sharing. We have one last question that, we will ask you all before we take a quick break. The question on the chat is that I see that women tend to downplay their skills and capability when they're searching for a job and better opportunity. They tend to say, well, we don't have that skill. I don't have all the check boxes that are required in the job description. So I may not even be qualified, so they won't even apply. Whereas men, they say that, I don't care about the job description. I have maybe 2 of those skills. I'm just going to go ahead and apply. So how did you overcome something like that, like your self-doubt, whether to see if you're fit for this job?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. This is part of the story that I wanted to tell. So last year, when carpooling was a thing, there was a new girl who joined my daughter's carpool to school, and the family was new in town, and so I was chit-chatting with the mom, and she mentioned that she worked for one of the local pharma companies here in Boston, and I was like, "Oh, are you a scientist?" And she's like, "Oh, I used to be. I work in business development now." I was like, okay, whatever. And we went on our merry way. And then later that day, I went and looked her up on LinkedIn. And not only was she in business development, she ran business development. She was like the senior vice president of business development for this big pharma company that was growing like astronomically. So I was like, holy cow, like here's this super strong, powerful, confident woman who like totally downplayed what she does to like another mom in the carpool. Like it felt like the most innocuous, sort of safest place to like say what she was, and she totally played it. And it was really funny because we have become quite good friends, lots of carpooling, lots of times with our daughters. And I called her on it a little bit, a few months later. And she said, well, the thing that's funny is that if she had said in that moment, well, I'm the senior vice president of, business development at blah, blah, blah. She's like, you probably would have looked at me funny. And I was like, yeah, I might have. It's reasonable. But I think that as women, we have this tendency to downplay the success that we have had in our careers in social and professional settings. And I think that, we could talk for hours about the sociological and cultural reasons why that is. But the thing that I think is the most effective is to acknowledge that it happens and to be really intentional about it in the moments that really matter most. So when you're applying for a job, say like, would I encourage a friend to apply for this job? If I were a guy, would I apply for this job? Like, does this job sound like something I'd love to do? And go apply for it, and be mindful of the fact that we do have this tendency to sort of downplay and underestimate our own capabilities and our own values. So I guess my overall message is don't try to change that hard wiring. I mean, do, but don't expect it to change right away. But in the short term, be really intentional about where it shows up and what you can do to counteract it.
Just
one thing I wanted to kind of.
Sorry, I think all of us wanted to add. Just quickly, one thing to add about being intentional is when you see your female colleagues and friends downplaying their skills, encourage them, not to do that and build them up. And when another woman tells you about her great achievements, don't look at her funny. Just say, that's great. I'm really happy for you. That's wonderful. So that's something else we can do.
Yes, that's totally true. Thank you, Tempest.
And just preempting, there's been some chatter in the chat around sort of how you present yourself at interviews and kind of being questioned about the one thing that you don't have sort of listed there. I think sometimes we don't realize that we go into an interview and we talk about the things that we don't have, to kind of preempt that. We need to kind of go into an interview and present all the great things that we've done, all the things we know really well, and really put our best foot forward. Because I definitely used to have a tendency of starting with the things that I could improve on, the things that maybe are lacking in my background. And that immediately changes the tone of the conversation, especially around interview. You have to lead with a really strong message.
So that's really great. I just have one more thing to add from a hiring manager perspective. Like I opened up a role, and I was looking at that with my recruiter, and I saw that there were 21 candidates who were automatically dispositioned because of the required qualifications we had in there. And we go and look in that. I'm like, you know what? If I were to apply for this job, I don't think I would. I mean, it's like it's really kind of ambiguous and vague. And so I went ahead and like looked at it and had to change the rec, take it down and repost it. And I was so glad that I took the time for it. But one of the things I figured out from that whole experience is, I mean, when hiring managers post recs on LinkedIn, if you look at the rec and you feel like, hey, this is really not inclusive language, or it doesn't really kind of talk about required qualifications that make sense, I would say reach out and like drop them a feedback. I mean, I would have loved to kind of have that. I would love to have that feedback and say, hey, does this role look like it's not kind of scaring people away, and it doesn't seem like there's hoops in here. Those are like qualifications. We want to communicate. We don't want to deter people. So that's another thing I would highly encourage as a hiring manager. If you see roles posted on LinkedIn by someone and you feel like, hey, this doesn't make sense or this could be changed, give the feedback. We are more than happy to kind of take that and work on it. That's
Thank you so much, everyone. It's a great conversation. It's hard to make a stop, but we need to take a 10-minute break. So thanks again for sharing your stories and answering all the participants' questions. So we'll be taking 10-minute break. So back at 10:21 Pacific time, and we'll see you soon. So grab your coffee and be back in 10 minutes. Okay. I hope you all had a good quick break. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back. Just a quick overview. We are Microsoft CSE organization. All the panelists are here to share their stories. So we're going to continue on with our program. Next up, we have Janani. Janani, please share your story and talk about yourself.
Cool. Welcome back, everyone. This has been so engaging. So I wanted to kind of cover a topic which has been talked about a little bit in the morning session about being yourself and, trusting in yourself, imposter syndrome, all of that. So it's just a story that goes back to a role I had in Microsoft a few years back. I was, first, for those of you who know, I worked in Microsoft India for about 6 years before I moved to the US. So I made a change of location, continent, team, role, everything. So I was a lead and became an individual contributor. And then when I joined the team, I kind of knew I wanted to be a lead. And I had mentioned that to my manager, and I had just taken up a new team, and one of the leads left, and then I ended up taking over the team. I was really happy. I was excited. 2 months into the role, my manager called me and he said, "Hey, you know what? We have a problem. So we have this other team that has so much critical work that they need to deliver." So this was the time of Windows 8, for those of you who still remember it. And then he was like, they have a lot of work, but that lead has decided he has to relocate for personal reasons. And so, you know what, we think that team really needs a lead. So we want you to take that team over. And he said, okay, it's your decision. You can choose what you want to do. You can stay with the team that you took over like 2 months back, or you can move over to this team. And he said, think over and come back. And I just walked out, and the things that went on in my mind were like this. I'm like, I just took over this team 2 months ago. The team is still adjusting to their new manager with everything that's happening, and then it's going to be disruptive for them. Is this really the right decision? And then the second thing that ran in my mind was, from a data perspective, I actually knew in the 2 months I'd taken over that this team kind of had work, but it wasn't much. I was struggling to kind of make sure I had the right kind of opportunities for folks to help in their career. And then there's other team where there's so much of work. And I'm like, what if I put both of them together? And I went back into my manager's room and I said, you know what, I'll do this. I'll take both the teams. I know I'll lead both the teams. It's going to be helpful. It's a win-win situation. And he looked at me like, that was never an option I gave you. I asked you to choose between one of the two teams. And I told him, like, this is the reason. I think, it's going to be helpful from the product perspective, from the people perspective. I want to make sure that, they feel that they have someone to support their back and they have the right kind of work. And he thought for a while, and I could say that he was really not sure. And then we decided to do it. And I managed a team of like 12 people for about 8 months. It was the most, probably the hardest time of my career in terms of adjusting to a new role and all of it. But it's something that I look back to this day and I'm like, why did I make that decision then? And why was that something that, came up? And I feel like, it's what we all bring onto the table, right? Being yourself, like being kind of thinking about it as how you would think, even if that's something that's not on the table. Like a lot of folks asked about, hey, I want to move from being an engineer to a project management role or like to a data scientist role. If you feel like that's what you want to do, I mean, it's perfect. Like try it out, and it's something that all the time works. And if the one thing I want to kind of say is when you unpack any decision that you make, you'd realize that you're actually going through a data processing in your mind, and you actually have data to support that. So that's kind of my story, and the lesson that I leave for folks to kind of ponder on is, make sure that, don't hesitate to bring yourself as you are. You don't have to be aggressive. You can be a compassionate leader. You can be someone who you are and still be the best in the job. So that's my story, and I'll stop at that. And if folks have questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, Janani, for sharing your story. There is actually a question from the audience member. The question is, what does it take to culturally fit in at Microsoft? What kind of a person can generally excel at Microsoft?
So I would like to kind of, reiterate Microsoft values, because that's, I think, kind of really summarizes what we are as a company, but I'll talk a little bit more than that too. Being respectful. I think, being able to have conversations, express your opinions in a respectful manner. So, we can foster a diverse environment, an inclusive environment, but that's still respectful. That's like one top thing. The second thing is integrity. Like everything that we do, like decisions that we make, have to be kind of centered around, being truthful to ourselves, being truthful to our customers, and that element of integrity. And the last thing is accountability, like ensuring that, we're accountable for your decisions, good or bad, and being able to kind of talk about it, take the responsibility for it, and move forward. Like that's kind of what we call as the growth mindset, right? It's not about failing. It's not about making mistakes. It's about learning from those. It's about being able to have that grit and that personality to say that, okay, this is something that I made a mistake. I need to kind of correct it and go on. So we are looking for people like that who are able to kind of be respectful, fit in this environment. And to one of Sarah's point early on, someone who's ready to learn. And that's something that I really kind of resonate with. What you know today is not going to be relevant, 5 years from now, as Sara said, like making sure that we have people who are open to learn, who are open to kind of come in and explore with us. So that I would say are, from my perspective, but I would love to have others, if you have any, any opinions or perspectives on that, to add on to it.
Yeah.
Point of diversity, definitely. I feel that, Microsoft for me has always been on the top of my list because I've seen it as a company that's at the forefront of things, and not from just a technology standpoint, but if you look from a diversity inclusion perspective, the goals that Microsoft sets for itself, as a company, I think are a tremendous forward and ahead of any of the other companies that I personally have worked with. So I believe that's a real value that we have in working in this company.
Yeah. Thank you, Cotishea and Janani, for sharing that. One phrase that comes to my mind when you talk about being curious and believing in yourself is that the concept that we have in Microsoft, from know it all to learn it all culture. I feel like it is so important, not only in Microsoft, in any place that you're working, right? Just being curious and being open to learning and for new experiences, I think it's the key. We are having such a good time and time is going by so quickly. Next up, I wanted to invite Sara to share her story. Sara, please. Sara, you're in mute.
There we go. Sure. So one of the things that people ask me a fair bit is whether they should continue being an IC or whether they should be a manager. And one of the things that I love about working at Microsoft is that we really believe in the value of and the contribution of individual contributors. And we acknowledge that the skill set that a great engineer has is not always a perfect overlap with the skill set of a great manager. And the last thing that we want is to take a bunch of really awesome engineers and turn them into really terrible managers. Obviously that's extreme, but the idea that if you want to be an individual contributor and you want to do great individual contributions, then you can do that and you can be rewarded all the way up to the doing that. And so becoming a manager is not the only way to be successful or to quote unquote get ahead. And so once I clarified that, I really encourage people to think about the contribution and the impact that they want to have in kind of the next cycle, whether it's the next product cycle or the next fiscal year or what have you. And what's the work that you want to do? Is there a business problem you want to figure out? Is there a specific technology that you want to develop expertise in? Is there an experience or project that you really want to work on? And really be less concerned about the role and more concerned about the impact to the organization that you want to have and the impact to yourself that you want to have. Where are you going to be able to do your best work and make the biggest contribution? So for example, in in my career, when I worked in product development, and I was a manager of organizations of varying sizes. And then I left Redmond and moved to the Boston area and started our campus here in Cambridge. And then as I was transitioning out of that, I joined what became CSE. And I'd been managing a team, but I joined as an individual contributor. And I really worked with our leadership to figure out what our business was going to be and how it was we were going to connect with customers and how we were going to do impactful work with them. And I worked with the engineers and data scientists and program managers who worked in my area, but we were all, kind of autonomous. And then as we started to figure that out and we needed to scale, it made more sense for the for people to have local managers. And so I became the manager, but it was not because I was like, oh, I want to be a manager. It was because that's what I needed, or that's what the business needed at the time. And that was the impact that I wanted to have. There's one more riff on this I want to mention, and that is around the questions that people have been asking about imposter syndrome. Lots of times, I think that one of the times when imposter syndrome sort of rears its ugly head is when we're considering new opportunities. And we have a tendency to downplay in our own mind our capability. So recently I had somebody I was talking with who was in an individual contributor role and was considering 2 new roles in our new organization, one as a manager and one as an IC. And the person kind of called to check in with me and said, well, I think I'm going to take the IC role. And we talked about all the reasons why and why they weren't considering the manager role. And I said, like, I sort of had this moment of bravery, and I said, I think your imposter syndrome is getting the better of you here. I think you are not taking the manager role because it's scary. You know how to do the IC role, and there's a risk associated with the manager role because you haven't done this before. I said, I think you can do it. I think you would learn a ton. And I think you should really reconsider why you are thinking about this direction. And ultimately, they ended up doing the manager role, and they're doing awesome. But I think it's just really important as you consider those decisions to think about the impact that you want to have, what your team needs in the moment, and also kind of what's motivating your own thinking about which way you want to go. So I will pause there and see if there are questions.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions, Sarah. So I'm gonna pick a couple. Do you have any salary negotiation stories or tips to share for people who are, who have an offer?
Well, I am perhaps the wrong person to ask about that, because when I joined Microsoft in 1991, after I joined, my colleagues and I were chit-chatting, and somebody was talking about options. And I said, options? What are options? So later, when I came back to the company, I was presented an offer, and I said, well, this is kind of a fine starting point, but I'd like to know what else, what more you can offer. And those are kind of the only 2 responses. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not a great negotiator myself, but I know that other people on this are much better than I am. So I will be quiet and defer to someone else who feels like they're better at it.
Anybody else wants to share their experience?
I can share, but more from I think I've kind of learned about how I can be better at. So it's kind of like Sara. So one of the things is really not feeling guilty about having that conversation. And I feel like, sometimes that women feel a little bit hesitant. And so the conversation doesn't happen directly. So I would kind of separate, kind of have that conversation as, hey, I really love the job. I really think that's an interesting role. But from a compensation perspective, this is something that's not what I expect. I mean, can we have more conversations? So trying to be as direct as possible. I'm learning this too. So I'll tell that it's kind of a learning in itself, but being not really beating around the bush, come to the point, be direct. And the second thing is do your homework. It's okay to kind of, have, if you have friends who are in companies. I mean, I have friends who are in Amazon or Facebook. It's okay to kind of ask them about it, talk to them about it, like do your homework before you actually have the conversation with a recruiter. So those are my 2 tips. And I know that there is a little bit of a don't show your cards, or like, do you actually start with an expectation? That's something that, I have different opinions on, but I think I would love for others to comment on it. That's my tips.
Yeah, I actually have a sticky on my computer with 3 things on a session that I took. It has 3 things: wish, want, and walk. So you have to have your 3 numbers. One is your wish, which is going to be your highest number. The second one is your walk, which is your solid ask, and then, or your want, which is your solid ask. The third is your walk. What is your walking away number? And so I have this because I, as well, am not good at negotiating. So I have to remind myself, and negotiating for me is a everyday thing. So I think it comes with practice, like practice negotiating on little things, so that when you get to the big things, you feel more confident and more prepared for it. That's just something that, for me, this comes in handy just on small things even, because it helps me when the bigger conversations happen. But I like to get some more perspective as well.
I love that.
If I may add,
yeah. Can you guys hear me?
So recently, sorry, Tempest, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Tempest.
Is my audio okay? Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to say,
it's a little bit spotty. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, building on what we had said about not undervaluing your skills before. So we had said how women maybe shy away from jobs because they don't see themselves as having all the skills. You can't take that mentality into salary negotiations, and you can't be going in thinking, oh, I don't really have all the skills, so I'm not going to ask for enough. It's really, really important that you do your homework and ask for what you're worth. So you have to know what you're worth, and just I would say overshoot on the confidence, because it doesn't come naturally to most people. So just go in and overshoot a bit, even if it's uncomfortable. That's my advice.
Yeah, thank you, Tempest. I was just going to say that recently I had given an advice to an young woman who has just got her first job offer. And she was feeling like, what will they think if I ask for more? It's look, they're not going to take your job offer back just because you ask for more. So I think, especially the newcomers to the industry, is so happy to get their offer. Sometimes, they forget to ask, what they think they're worth. So yeah, just keeping that in mind, and it's okay to ask. Thanks again, Sara and Janani, for sharing your stories. We are going to be moving on to our breakout rooms. So there is going to be 2 breakout rooms. I think the information is going to be posted somewhere. Jessica, do you have the breakout room information? There is one that is going to be hosted by Sara, and the other one is Janani. And then the rest of us, the panelists, will still be here talking about our stories and continuing on with this conversation. So let's just take a couple of seconds to find these breakout rooms. Oh, okay. Great. Okay. Sorry. I was just told that there is no breakout rooms because the conversation is so good and engaging. So they want us to keep going. So apologize again for giving some information. I just got this message from the organizer. So we're going to be continuing on. So next up, Cotishea, we want you to share your story. Please go ahead.
Sure, I will start. So I just like to tell kind of my background. Like I said, I am a computer scientist by degree. I put quotes by degree because I did in my career. I was a child of technology. I loved the idea of technology. And so at a very young age, I got involved in a light version of a programming class in middle school. And I really was impressed by the things that I was able to do in such a short period of time. And that led me to really kind of thinking more about like what would a future or career look like in this area. Coming from a very small town, I didn't have many options. I felt like it was a teacher or a nurse or potentially a doctor or a lawyer, but you know, that was it. And I really wanted out of this small town. So to be honest, that was some of my motivation. The other was that, you know, in sitting in the back of a church in Mississippi, I heard a speaker talk about how he was a computer scientist and all the wonderful things he got a chance to do. And for me, it was just, wow, my technology, my passion for this, as well as being able to do something that's going to allow me to travel and see other things and experience something outside of this small town. I was all for it. So I decided to, you know, computer science. I was 13, computer science. That's it. That's life. Had no idea what it was about. Didn't know anyone other than the individual that spoke who had done it before. But that's what I stuck with through college. And it was challenging. In getting my first job, moving to Texas, I found that I did not want to program. I had the opportunity to program for 3 years, didn't like it that much. I was designing code in C, and it was just not the most exciting thing for me. So I had an opportunity to go get my master's in project management, and the company was paying for it, which was a bonus. And so I took that opportunity, pursued the master's degree in project management, and my life just really opened up. So I think someone had asked earlier, like, what does that transition look like? And to me, it's just a decision that you make personally. If you're interested in seeing something happen from beginning to end and driving teams to deliver that, you know, if you're interested in playing a larger role and seeing the bigger picture, then I think project management is a great way to go about doing it. And so the opportunities that have come to me, like I said, I was in telecommunications for many, many years. I had the opportunity a few years back to work on a transition project in Dubai for Etisalat. I came over to Microsoft. I joined this wonderful team. And so things have just really opened up for my life and my career. And, you know, one of the things that I've realized too, with having the background, the logical thinking, the project management, seeing things beginning to end, a lot of time it starts to come into your life. And so for me, I find, like you say, I have stickies. My life has become manage this, organize this, make sure you do that. Yes, we all have our stickies. So that's kind of the life of a project manager. The great thing about it that I've realized, if you're going to say anything great from this whole experience that we've gone through over the last few months with COVID, is that you're able to compartmentalize things a little bit better. So I'm selling project management, but that's why, because I just feel like it's given me the ability to have so many different avenues, open up my life to enjoy the passion that I have around technology, to travel the world in some ways and see things that I would have never gotten an opportunity to experience before. One of the things as well is you know, leaving telecommunications, joining Microsoft. I'd spent 20 years in telecommunication. It was a little bit humbling to come out of that career and kind of start over. And I will say this to anyone who's thinking about like making a shift from an industry and feel like you're starting over. A lot of times we think about the career ladder as being vertical, and it's not always that way. Sometimes it's just a jungle gym. It's about getting in the game, not standing on the sidelines and waiting for someone to come pull us in, taking that next step, that next best step, and giving yourself grace, because no one gets it perfect, right? And we are so hard on ourselves a lot of times. I know that I am. We are so hard on ourselves. So it's like, it's not about being perfect. It's about being present, and it's about getting out there and giving it your absolute best. So over my career, I've learned that, you know, you got to take the chance, take the opportunity. I don't want to look back 10 years from now and have regrets because I didn't step out there. Also, I feel like I've inspired my younger brother is an engineer. My sister's going back and getting her degree. Now my older brother is in telecommunications. So I've inspired a lot of people. And I like to take the credit, but it's not all me. It's about them also making a decision to be present and to step forward. So that's my story.
Okay, thank you, Cotishea, for sharing your very inspiring story. We have a lot of questions for you, and we have a couple here that I wanted to ask. How did you figure out that the project management is more interesting for you than being a software developer? How hard it is to change?
Yeah, so my first experience in project management came back at Y2K, so I'll date myself a little bit. We were making sure that a lot of the networking systems were updated for Y2K. And I was kind of on the engineering side, just, making sure the coding was accurate. And someone had to go and leave. And I realized, like, I had to fill in for them for what was supposed to be a week. And I loved it. I loved having the ability to make sure things got done. So it's like that woman mentality. You have your checklist, things are getting done, making sure everyone's lined up, they're in order. And so it was that passion as well to me that married well with, having the experience and the knowledge on the technology. And that's kind of where I made that decision.
Thank you. Cotishea, the next question we have is, how are you handling work-life balance during this pandemic with your family? Is it going smoothly, and what are some of the tips for participants?
That's a really good question. So we're on the roller coaster. I think we're up right now. We're on the upward trend. So I'm a single mom. I have a 13-year-old. She's actually in high school. She started school when we were in Dubai, so she's a year ahead. But the challenge was this: I did not feel comfortable sending her back to school full time with, not knowing the situation. And so my thought was, how do I balance this? I want her to be independent, but again, she's only 13, right? So how much can I actually put on her shoulders, and when do I check in? So what I did was I went back to my calendar and I made sure I had intentional time in my calendar to have lunch with her. So we take those 30 minutes for lunch. We talk about how things are going so far. I get kind of an early rundown on where she may be having challenges. And then in the evening, I log off. And it's usually not for the day. So I'll log off at 5:30, but it's for a few hours so that we can have dinner together. We can go on a walk through the neighborhood, and then I'll come back on in the evening. So that's been my balance. Some evenings I'm exhausted and it doesn't happen, but I'm just going to get up really early the next day and get it done. But it's about being intentional with the time that I have with her, because, I only have 4 more years anyway. And so I'm already starting to, she's going to be out of high school soon. She's going to have her own life. So I want to be very intentional about making sure she's set up for success. And, with daughters, they look at you, they look at how you handle things. And so I want her to see not her mom in her office just spazzing out all the time, but I will be honest with her. It's about, hey, if I'm having a rough day, I'm going to tell you about it. And she'll give me advice. And I'm like, yeah, great. But pulling her into the conversation is important as well.
Thank you. And then I think there's one phrase that I often hear is, it's not work-life balance, it is work-life integration, and especially with the pandemic. So, the great points that you've made about, just finding that integration, right, in your work and home life. So thank you for sharing that. So next up, it's my turn to share my story. So, I'll go quickly. So I came from a very small town in India, and I went to an engineering college a long time ago. And then we had 200 people in our batch in our engineering college, and there was only 12 women, right? So that means that oftentimes, whether you're in labs or whether you're doing presentation, you're only woman at the table, right? And representing and speaking for yourself. So I think these are some of the learnings that I've taken in my life, and I came to United States for a grad school, and then the whole world opened up for me, like be interacting with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, all the opportunities that I had. It was really eye-opening. And then one interesting thing that I wanted to share with everyone is about my returnship. It is a slight different journey for me, and then I wanted to share that with you. So after I worked as a software engineer for several years, there was time in my life where I wanted to be home with my kids, and that is the decision that I made. Again, I don't want to start this debate of, you want to stay home and take care of kids versus, going back to work. It is the decision for me. I'm not starting the debate. So the thing that I wanted to mention is that even though I made that decision, I had my long-term goals in mind. I do want to get back at some point, right? So I kind of thought to myself, what is that I can do, while I'm working and not working and staying home with kids, right? How am I going to keep up with technology, and how am I going to stay relevant? So that means that you need to plan, even if it is like long term, 5 years from now, you have to have a plan. So the plan I came up with is that, is there something part-time that I can do while kids are at school? So that's what opened, my world for me to teaching. So I said, in local community college, they're looking for instructors who can teach programming languages. So I applied for a job in a local community college. And, I was teaching part-time and keeping in touch with the technology. And you all know, right? In technology, you snooze, you lose, and things change so fast. So that, 5 years, if you're totally has not been in touch with technology, things change quite a bit. So that really opened up the doors for me when I decided to go back to, and apply for jobs. I was able to, get a job at Microsoft in the learning team. And then I moved on to CSE. So just the take home point is that you need to plan and you need to advocate for yourself long term, right? And all the goals that you want to set and achieve in small, strides. You don't have to have, lofty goals all at once, but, making those small steps. So what is the dream job for me? Why is the working in CSE dream job for me? I sincerely believe that, you get a lot of purpose and satisfaction in life when you're helping others. And right, in CSE, we are all about helping our customers, achieve their, business goals and, making sure that they're overcoming their technical challenges. So that is the most exciting part of the job for me. And then I work with the tech, right? So you obviously having interest in technology and working with the tech is also, something that interests me. So yeah, this is my story, and I know, you have to believe in yourself. Make sure that you set your goals and you achieve your goals and you plan. You have to be planner all the time. So thank you again for listening to my story. And I wanted to ask the other panelists if you have any questions for me.
So, Jhansi, I wanted to ask something about your hobbies. And I know that you recently went on your trail for like how many, 16 miles or something on enchantments. So what are your things that you do to kind of keep yourself sane during the pandemic? And how do you do it?
Yeah, thank you, Janani. Yes, thank you. I've always been an avid outdoors person. I hike in summers and fall times, and I ski during winter. So during the pandemic, that is one thing that I've kept up with. Every weekend, at least one day, I would go spend time outdoors, and it was really, such an awesome, like a kind of a calming effect for me, during the whole week. You're, sitting in front of the computer on one, Teams call or Zoom call after the other. And I just needed that break away from the computer in the wilderness, right? So, and having a goal again, right? And planning for it. So my goal was to do this very hard enchantments hike, which is like 22 miles. So I trained for it throughout the summer, and I was just able to do that a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling Janani about it. So that's how I kind of, kept through this pandemic and kind of motivated myself to a goal that I've set for myself. So yeah, thank you for asking that question, Janani. We do have few more minutes. So I think, before we close, I wanted to ask each of the panelists, what is one takeaway that you want the participants of this panel to take home? So I'll start with you, Sara. Sara, you're on mute.
I'm going to say you put me on the spot. I think that the biggest piece of advice that I have is to be intentional. And when your gut is telling you to do something, to think twice about what your motivation is and whether that is kind of your cheerleader, your inner cheerleader, or your biggest fan, or whether it's your doubting self or your imposter syndrome at work, and just really think about what advice you would give a friend in the same situation, or what advice you would give somebody that you're mentoring, and apply that same level of ambition and enthusiasm to your own work.
Cotishea?
Awesome. I'm going to pull another sticky. So this is my divorce the thought that the thoughts that tell you that you are not good enough or qualified enough. So that's what I would say. Like, cut it off. You are good enough. You are qualified enough. The thoughts that you have in your mind, the stories that you tell yourself about your experiences, cut them off.
Thank you. Janka?
Just to build upon that, for me, it's all about you have talent, you are capable, and you do belong, right? It's all about basically asking for what you want and knowing your own worth. And once you know what you're worth, other will start seeing it too. So start by believing in yourself, as much as hard it is. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing. We all get our self-doubt, but believe in yourself and everything else will align.
Thank you. Janani?
So mine's kind of very similar to Janka and what Cotishea mentioned, but really being your authentic self. And everybody's unique, and I think that's really what we need. We need that we need that diversity. So if you think a particular way, if you feel like you don't fit in, that's great. I think that's actually what you bring into the table. So just be yourself, and you'll be awesome. And thank you so much for sharing your questions.
Federica? You're up.
Sure. So really, I guess what Janka and Cotishea and Janani said are the strongest messages that I want to kind of voice too. Just be proud of who you are, and be willing to be vulnerable too. And I think that we are kind of going into an era where it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be a compassionate leader, and I'm really just hopeful for the future of technology, with all these kind of great women and all of you kind of that will contribute to that too.
Thank you. Tempest?
Yeah, I would say in a similar vein, one of my mottos in my career has been fortune favors the bold. So you have to go out there and do sometimes scary, brave, bold things, because if you don't apply for a scholarship or you don't apply for a dream job, you'll never get it. So you have to, I'm always pushing myself out of my comfort zone to do something bold, and that has served me well. So that's my advice.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. And Tempest, yeah, I know I would agree with you. My closing thought would be growth and comfort, they don't coexist. So you have to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable to grow. So thanks again to all our panelists and our awesome audience. And again, thank you, Women in Tech, for giving us this opportunity to bring this voice of women with their illustrious career to you. Thanks to all the participants for your engagement. I've seen a lot of chat going back and forth, and our panelists are answering some of your questions on the chat. So please post your LinkedIns on the chat so that we can connect with each other.